So I was basically born drunk. My mom had an alcohol problem. She drank throughout my pregnancy, but I don't think very much. I'm not really sure. She's also told me I need to tell every single doctor that I visit that I was born with my umbilical cord wrapped around my neck and like was suffocated at birth. Maybe that has something to do with my ADHD. I don't know, or depression. I don't know. But I started having feelings that were not okay probably around the age of 13. I got into a lot of trouble when I was, just all throughout my life. So I was raised Jewish. My dad sent me to a Catholic high school because he thought the nuns could handle me better and give me a good ass whooping, when I needed it. There's a lot of rich kids at that school. We were well off, but definitely not rich. So I decided to do an entrepreneurial venture and start dealing drugs to all the rich kids. That was my first job, my first entrepreneurial job. I've been a hustler ever since. Okay, so I guess I can yay for drug dealing. It started out with marijuana. I remember my first drink. It was my first real drunk was at age 14. I was a freshman. It was a Mickey's malt liquor. And I remember the feeling coming over me of being finally being okay, feeling okay in my skin. Like everything just faded away and it was like this magical, drink. We were partying on a golf course and there was this grass hill. I just opened my arms and I just rolled down this hill just because I just felt so free. My mind shut down. I wasn't struggling. I wasn't battling with myself. It was wonderful. I'm like, okay, I need to be like this all the time. This is my medicine. This is it. I discovered marijuana. I was like, this is even better. Great. I love this stuff. I'm going to sell it, make a lot of money. I didn't make a lot of money because I smoked most of it. But I got better as I grew, my entrepreneurial ways got a little bit better. But this is a pretty conservative part of America, I believe. So I might offend some people in here, but I'll try not to. So my dad's very conservative. I was never allowed to have boys in the house. I was never allowed to have them in my room. They always had to come to the door and meet him first. I was never allowed to call boys, right? At all. So I told him I thought that I might be gay. His response was, you just haven't had enough dick yet. I was like, oh, is that what it is? That's gonna save me? I'm like, okay. But that was the response. And so that's kind of what I grew up with. And I had developed crushes on my friends, and it was just not okay to be gay in Orange County, California, and within my family. So I had envisioned a white picket fence, just because that was what I was told. You grow up, you become a lawyer or a doctor, and you have a white picket fence and a house with 2 kids and a dog. Well, it just kind of, everything was blown away for me. So I'm like, okay, well, clearly I cannot live on this planet, because where do I fit in? So I started cutting, and that didn't work, so then I attempted suicide at age 14 or 15. That was my first time institutionalized. And I was put on more antidepressants. And when I got out a couple of years later, I moved on to bigger and better things, which was meth and speed, and I was dealing that as well. I was kicked out of my high school, my Catholic high school, because I punched the dean in the face. Started dealing drugs. I ended up getting back into that high school because I told them I had dealt with my anger issues through poetry. And they believed the bullshit. I'm a major bullshit artist, and they took it. So, and most youth who struggle with depression and alcoholism, we are really good at the bullshit. So it's really hard to read through it. So yeah, I got back in. I didn't actually get to walk on my graduation because I thought it would be really funny to throw a bunch of paint on some teachers. Like I was just out of control. And there were so many signs, as far as my depression is concerned and being bipolar, that was just ridiculous that I wasn't properly treated then. So I ended up going to college in Santa Barbara. Does anybody know where Santa Barbara is? Santa Barbara. I was functioning. I was a functioning addict at this time. I was medicated, but it wasn't right. It was just for major depression. It wasn't for bipolar. So I was self-medicating still with, this time now medication, Ritalin, Ambien, Klonopin, Xanax, and I would just mix all those together and try to get my balance all throughout the day. Oh, and opiates. I was a major opiate addict. I managed to keep myself together. I ended up serving an internship in the White House in 1998 under President Clinton. And I ended up graduating my class magna cum laude, top of my class. So I'm not dumb. I just have a little bit of a brain problem. I ended up starting my own company out of college. It was a mortgage real estate company. I made a ridiculous amount of money selling loans that should not have been sold at all. And as a result of the market, I lost everything, went bankrupt. And it was also because of my using and my drinking. Once the market crashed, I was a small broker, so I went out of business pretty quickly. I had an office in Orange County, an office in Beverly Hills, and a call center out in India, and this is in my 20s. And I was using heavily prescription medication. This is where I was all prescription now, and drinking. When the market crashed, I was like, oh, no, Wall Street will go ahead and open the floodgates again. They're just really scared right now. And I just kind of ran amok for 6 months, like using and just ignoring all my responsibilities. And so I lost all the savings that I had. My overhead was like in excess of $30,000 a month. So, you do the math, there's no money coming in. It kind of goes out really quickly. So I went bankrupt and got into the fitness business. What happened was I was taking classes at this place called Barry's Boot Camp. And my instructor kept saying, he's like, you have a drinking problem. I'm like, fuck you. What is your problem? Like, just yell at me and tell me to do, 15 push-ups and get out of my business, right? He's like, I can smell it on you. Every single time you walk in, you smell like an alcohol factory. Anyway, he kept after me. And finally, I'm like, all right, I'll try to stay sober for a day. And then a day went to 2 days and 3 days and 4 days. He ended up becoming my sponsor. And I managed to stay sober for a year and a half, and that's where I came to terms with the fact that I had a severe eating disorder as well. I have it all. I mean, you put a box of hair right here, I will get addicted to it. I swear. Okay? Or eat it. So the eating disorder took me out because I was gaining weight. Once you get sober and you're taking a bunch of like Ritalin all the time and you stop taking the Ritalin, you put weight on. So I was putting all the weight on. I'm like, I can't have this. I live in Hollywood, California. It's like, no way, right? So I relapsed on pills and alcohol to lose weight again, and I was off and running. I managed to amass a pretty significant client base of mainly R&B artists and celebrities. So I was traveling with them quite frequently. My eating disorder was at its all-time high, like horrible eating disorder. What it was a binge eating disorder and exercise bulimia. So I would binge, and then I would exercise the next day for about 6 hours a day. And I was a personal trainer at this time now because I had changed careers. So, I was just working out all the time. And I was in New York City with a client, and I was miserable, depressed, and could not manage my eating disorder anymore. And I decided I was not suitable to live on the planet the way I was at. So I had a bunch of pills. I believe at the time it was the same concoction. There was Ritalin, there was opiates, there was benzos, there was Ambien. So I threw down whatever I had, and I drank on top of it. And I get a knocking on the door, like at 3 o'clock. They're screaming at me, like, where have you been? We've been trying to reach you. I wake up, urine all over the bed, donuts and pizza smashed all over me. The mini bar was destroyed. Like, it looked like a football team had come through there. The only thing I can think of was that what happened was I binged myself out of my overdose. I don't know how else I survived my overdose, but other than the food, because I clearly ate a shit ton. I had to pay for the room. I had to pay for the damages of the room. I damaged the room pretty good. Don't know what went on in there. So that was 7 years ago. I told them, I'm like, hey, just fly me home. I didn't open the room. I'm like, fly me home. I got an emergency in LA. They still to this day don't know what happened. And I admitted myself to treatment a little bit over 7 years ago. It's a dual diagnosis treatment center in Arizona called Rosewood. And I was in there for depression, eating disorder, and substance abuse. Worst experience of my life, coming off of trying to get rid of all of those three things at the same time. They almost kicked me out because I was that much of a handful. I was just off my nut. So I met a girl in there, of course, in treatment. It's the best place to find a life partner. I walk up to her, and the thing you do when you're in treatment, you're like, hey, how many times have you been in treatment? Oh, how many times have you been in treatment? It's like, stripes, right? So she's like, 26 times, not including 16 psychiatric stays. I'm like, oh my God, wife material. Wife material. She gets me, right? So of course, what do? We move in together afterwards. She ends up relapsing hardcore on her eating disorder. She was extreme bulimic anorexic. We ended up getting a dog. The dog's like part of my story. What happened was, after I got out of treatment, I didn't know how to function. I didn't know how to function without the eating disorder, without my drugs, alcohol. Like, I always had one or the other. So I basically laid on the couch, I laid on the couch, unable to move in a severe depressive episode for 5 months. I watched nothing but Law & Order SVU and Forensic Files. And that's all I could do. I couldn't wash a dish, I couldn't do laundry, I couldn't open a piece of mail. She's in and out of psychiatric institutions all the time. She's like, so I think it's time for you to go to UCLA psychiatric ward. And I'm like, no. She's like, well, doesn't it kind of sound nice? They bring your food for you, you get coffee. I'm like, yeah, okay, all right. Anyway, I was admitted to the UCLA psych ward to manage my depression. And I did it to save my sobriety, because this is the longest period of sobriety I've ever had. In there's a woman in there, a young girl, and her mom owned a dog foundation. And she had some flyers with her for some reason. And there was this one flyer of this dog, and it said lesbians only, because the dog kept biting dudes. Yeah, he was returned to the foundation like 5 times because he kept biting the men, So I was like, perfect. Go hand in hand. I'm not a man-hater, okay? So she's like, no, you cannot get the dog. You can't take care of yourself. I'm like, okay. 3 days later, she goes in the psych ward. She goes into Cedars-Sinai psych. I'm like, I'm getting this dog now. So I went and got the dog when she was in the psych ward. She gets out. She's like, you need to return the dog. I'm like, look, if you're giving me an ultimatum between you and the dog, it's going to be you going. So we ended up breaking up. I had spent all my money on treatment because insurance sucks. And I ended up living out of my car with my dog. And I ended up getting a little job at the time, and it was a really humbling experience. I worked at a gym, basically picking up weights off the floor, and this is coming from somebody where I was traveling the world with clients and making ridiculous amounts of money, staying in the nicest hotels all over the place, and here I am making minimum wage, picking up weights off the floor. So I kept the car underneath the grounds, underneath the underground parking lot, and I had Rufus in the car. His name's Rufus. And I would sleep down there with Rufus, and then I'd come down and I'd shower at the gym, and then come down and walk him on my breaks and stuff. So that's kind of how I put my life back together. And then I just kind of grew, obviously little by little I started putting my life back together, amassing a little bit more money. I ended up having to file bankruptcy. The journey for the last 7 years has been a complete and total growth experience. I've grown up considerably. Now, as far as my mental illness is concerned, like I said, many, many years, every doctor has diagnosed me bipolar. And I'm like, absolutely not. I am not bipolar. And so finally, I came to terms with it recently, 3 years ago. I went to my last doctor's like, you're bipolar. I'm like, I'm not bipolar. I'm not. I'm just depressed. I went to another doctor who's like the guru of bipolar. I'm like, I didn't know this at the time. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna tell her how I'm feeling and see what she says. I'm not gonna tell her what the doctors have all told me, right? She's like, you're bipolar 2. And I'm like, bipolar 2? I'm like, okay, I didn't know that there was a bipolar 1 and 2 and 3, or 4 different stages of bipolar. I'm like, oh, all right. And she told me the symptoms of that, of bipolar 2. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that actually fits. That actually makes sense. I'm like, because I don't have the crazy manias, like where you're off running and like where you think you're Jesus and stuff like that. Like, I don't have that. You know, I have the hypomanic episodes. And what that looks like for me is one morning I woke up. This is before I was properly medicated. And I decided I needed to buy a motorcycle. Thought that was a really great idea. I live in LA. Motorcycles in LA are not a good idea. I go down to Harley Davidson with $5,000. I'm like, I want to buy a used bike. He's like, no, let's get you financed. We'll get you a nicer bike. I'm like, okay. He's like, you're financed for like $20,000. I'm like, yes, let's get this $20,000 bike. It's like $400 a month. I'm like, perfect. I sit on it. I can't even put my feet on the ground. I can't ride it. I don't even test ride it. I'm like, I'll take it. I'll take it. Great idea. Sign the paperwork. At this point, I'm in a blackout. Basically, I'm signing the paperwork. I don't remember signing the paperwork. I know I must have signed paperwork. I don't remember. As soon as I step off the lot, it all come crashing down. I realized what I had done. I go home and laid in bed, canceled my clients for 2 days, and just laid there. I could not move and could not function. I call my dad, who's an attorney. I'm like, this is what happened. He's like, you're an idiot, but this is how you're going to get out of it. He's like, did you ever test drive the motorcycle? I said, no. He's like, you never took it off the lot? I'm like, no. He's like, then you can get out of it because you never took possession of it. I'm like, great. So I ended up getting out of that deal. But that's kind of that's how my hypomania looks. It's just extremely high, impulsive, ridiculous things that I do. And it's just very short. And then I'm in a severe depressive state for days, for weeks, for however long, sometimes months. So anyway, I finally get on medication, this proper medication, about 3 years ago now, and my life completely changed. I've never been more stable. I don't have those impulse control issues anymore. I still deal with depressive episodes, for sure. It's not 100% gone, but the hypomanic episodes that were kind of like screwing my life up a little bit, I don't have those at all anymore. And that's why I started Tangible Movement, was because, oh, and one other thing, my mom, something wrong with her. We just never knew what it was. She's also been on all sorts of medications all of her life. She's a hoarder, and I was going through her hoard because I had to move her to Victorville because I had to help their rent, and it's cheaper out there. And I found this old prescription from 1985 for lithium. I'm like, Mom, what is this? I'm like, are you bipolar? She's like, yeah, the doctors always said I was bipolar, but your father would never let me take the medication. I was like, oh my God. If only my life would have been so different. Also, when I would go see the doctors, my dad would not allow the insurance to be billed because he didn't want anybody to know. So I had to pay cash. We had to pay cash for the therapy and for all the psychiatric treatments I would go through because he was embarrassed by it. And he thought like his lawyer friends or whatever were going to find out through our medical records. I don't know what he was thinking, but so my mom is mentally ill. I'm mentally ill. But yeah, I have to say that my life today is, normal. I never really had a normal life. I'm sober. I've been abstinent from my eating disorder for 7 years. I have a great life as far as, my job is concerned. As far as my little dog, I love my dog. I still have him. But yeah, that is mental illness in a nutshell as far as what my journey has been. And it could have all been changed. The trajectory of my life could have been changed had I accepted the fact that I was severely mentally ill at a younger age, and I had supportive parents and a therapist who didn't say, forget about your gay issues. So it's important what you guys say to your patients, and it's important what you hear from them. That's the most important thing, is to listen. But that's all I have as far as my story is concerned. I'll go ahead and open it up for questions and answers at this time. Thank you very much.